We have a lot of Japanese whiskeys. The first time I saw one was sometime in the mid-90s. The last time I saw one sell was like $2,000. Hey everybody, welcome to Big Whiskey Rebellion. It's Mac McCormick here. Today we are talking about Japanese whiskeys, something that really we didn't see much of in the United States until about 2014. Here are our guests. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Cindy King. Not typically drink any of this, so I'm trying this Japanese whiskey. Typically not in my palate, so but I'm going to try and see what happens and see where my palate changes.
Sounds great.
My name is Dale King. I'm a longtime bourbon drinker. I've just recently started branching out into more of the whiskeys and stuff from around the globe.
My name is Brendan Klein. I work in the service industry myself.
Well, today they're all new, probably for all of you. Cindy, I know you usually beer bong, Long Island iced teas, and that's like in your wheelhouse. Just kidding. But you told me that you usually don't like whiskey that much, and that's why I'm starting with you. Actually, I'm going to give all three of you the whiskeys at the same time. So the thing about Japanese whiskey is it's actually very similar to Scotch. The history of Japanese whiskey was when trade about spirits were going on around the world. Tradesmen were bringing whiskey from Scotland over to Japan, and there was two gentlemen from Japan that both made the voyage to Scotland, Mr. Nika and Mr. Suntory, which are two of the largest distilleries now. And they started the whole tradition of making whiskey in Japan. It has expanded dramatically. I think the first time I saw one was sometime in the mid-90s. We had a few of them, but I never had anybody to go, hey, can I have that Japanese whiskey? And then in 2014, the world changed. The Suntory Yamazaki Sherry Cask 18-year won Whiskey of the World, and it just changed everything. And so every single person that was really into whiskey at that time started asking me about Japanese whiskeys. I went from never selling any to not being able to keep it in stock. It was a really weird thing. So we're gonna start with the Kariashi malt whiskey, which is kind of a newer release product for us here in Virginia. It's very mild, and I think you're gonna like it. And I think all of us are gonna like it. But I want you to just taste it and tell me what you think.
I was just going to say it's a lot sweeter than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It's pretty smooth.
Like me.
Just
like Mac.
Yes. Anytime somebody describes whiskey and it sounds nice, I'm like, that's like me.
Kind of getting like almost like a white grape flavor, like white wine, almost a little bit out of that. It's kind of really coming through on the nose and the face.
And I think that that's partly because this is a younger whiskey. I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty light. Typically younger whiskeys, you're catching more of the sweetness of the grain that they distill from. In this case, it's malted barley. Barreling of this is ex-bourbon, which brings that kind of caramel vanilla note to the back end of the whiskey. The sweetness being forward is definitely from the age. As whiskeys sit in a barrel longer, they get more mature, they take on the tannins from the barrel, and it's not a bad thing to have a young whiskey. Actually,
Which is why you said I would like that one.
Well, I think you're gonna like all of them. And I think you're gonna be shocked as a person who doesn't normally drink whiskey that it's not what you think.
Well, it was the first time I took a sip, I was like, well, I'm not sure. The second time, it's very smooth.
Yes.
And it's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. That's just kind of like a nice introductory Japanese whiskey. The next one is actually one of my favorites, and it's a relatively new release here in Virginia. I'm not sure how long it's been out in Japan, but this is an 8-year age-stated Hatuzaki Omakase. These are aged in Mizunara casks. Mizunara wood is a type of Japanese oak that really lends a completely different quality to any whiskey that it's aged in. A lot of bourbon makers are now starting to do secondary finishes in Mizunara casks. The barrels themselves are very expensive. I think I read that they were over $2,000 a piece to manufacture because it's a very old growth wood. It takes a long time for the wood to be into a mature enough state to create barrels. It definitely creates a beautiful flavor. It lends a giant toffee note to the back end of any whiskey that it's aged in. So I think you're gonna really like this one a lot.
I did get the caramel toffee notes that you talked about, but you can also pick up the taste of that barrel at the end, on the back end.
Very distinctive.
Yeah, it's very good.
But how nice is this?
It was good.
So you told me you hated whiskey.
Well, I really haven't, I guess I really haven't tried enough. Like I said, I'm very much, I go by smells. And a lot of times when I when he has whiskey or bourbon, or I'll smell it, and a lot of times I'm like, no.
Sure.
I mean, so I probably don't give it a chance.
So I think most people, when they are younger, particularly, and we start drinking, we naturally gravitate to things that taste like something that we like. What was the first alcohol you ever had?
Oh man, a Limerita. Those canned margarita things, are disgusting. Oh, absolutely horrible.
That was the first?
That was my first.
Wow, you really are young.
So my first thing that I drank was Boone's Farm. I actually still like Boone's Farm, but it's more like a nostalgic thing. I never am like, I should have a fine glass of Boone's Farm. But like, when it happens to be in my, view, I'll drink some only because it kind of makes me smile and makes me think about like being 17 and drinking illegally and feeling like cool because I was getting away with it.
I think one of my first was probably TJ Swan, which was usually on the shelf right next to the Boone's Farm.
Oh, nice. It sounds more distinguished. So.
Yes. So is that it's not a lottery bottle technically?
No, you can order this from the store and it's just phenomenal.
Honestly, that toffee and caramel really comes through on that. It just got smoother every time I took a sip too. Like I kind of had a little bit of water, then went back to it, and it's already just airing out. It's getting smoother and smoother every time, which is really nice.
I agree with that comment for me too, which is surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Just
coats the palate really nicely.
Yeah,
the flavors.
It's very rich, and like I said, that barrel that they use, the Mizunara oak, it is special. It is incredible, and one of the hardest to get bourbon products out there right now is an Angel's Envy Mizunara cask. And I think when they retailed those, they were $300, but the last time I saw one sell was like $2,000 because it does impart this really special quality to the whiskey. Yeah. I would never be like, hey, you should buy a $2,000 bottle. And it's one of those, I want to taste it kind of things, but I'm not gonna buy a bottle for $2,000 to drink. Even with this show, the goal is to show people the special whiskeys that don't cost $1 million and are accessible. I want to teach you
so you can get it yourself.
Yeah, it's important to me. So the last whiskey would be a whiskey that I would say is kind of what inspired the Japanese distillers to start making whiskey. This is the Glenkinchie. In this case, it was a Glenkinchie that was finished in Amontillado casks, which I didn't know what Amontillado was until I started reading Poe when I was in high school, and the story of the cask of Amontillado, where this guy is forcing his boss basically to drink this Amontillado, and the entire time he's working, building this brick wall, the boss is sitting on top of a cask of Amontillado, drinking and just being disrespectful and rude to him, and the entire time he's just putting down the worker. And then at the end of the story, you realize that he has walled him in and he's left him blocked into this room of Amontillado where he passes out and presumably dies.
Yeah.
And so I remember at 16 reading that story, and I was like, man, what is Amontillado?
Yeah, right.
And it took years for me to actually realize it was a type of sherry. So this is a sherry casked Glenkinchie, which is a lowland Scotch. And I love this whiskey, but I also love that story. So on the nose, you can almost smell like a fruitiness.
Oh yeah.
And that is a combination of that sherry casking with the grain.
It smells very different from the taste, I'd say.
Definitely.
So that kind of tingly, earthy note on the back end, that is because this is a peated whiskey. They do peat whiskeys in Japan, but not as strongly. There are some that are heavily peated. In this case, this is a mild peat. But the way I would equate peat to people that don't know whiskey is kind of like the earthiness that you get from some of the red wines that are out there. So do you see where this would lead into these?
Yes, definitely.
In the future, do you think that you'll be buying Japanese whiskeys?
Yes, I really liked it. The one you have right there was my favorite out of the three, but honestly, they were all very good.
Well, I mean,
which is surprising for me. I'm still a little surprised. But.
Definitely my favorite too. Well, that's why I brought it out. We have a lot of Japanese whiskeys, but this is kind of like a home run whiskey. I knew you in particular would really like this one.
Really? It's my favorite.
Because it's so beautiful and balanced, and I
get it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.